You can absolutely conquer whatever it is you choose to confront. In this show, we talk PTG, we listen and believe, we support and empower.
Hey, that's what I always dreamed of, but I was nervous sometimes.
Yeah,
Each time I moved a little closer and a little closer
yeah,
and a little closer,
yeah.
and some told me, just take a leap of faith.
There you
Go
go.
ahead, let's jump.
Ready? Let's go. Leap of faith. There you go. Whoa.
Whether you have experienced domestic violence personally or not, someone you know has. Your circle of family, friends, acquaintances, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience domestic violence at some point in their life. Physical abuse is only one of the many forms of domestic violence. Survivors also report experience of verbal, emotional, spiritual, sexual, financial, electronic, and so much more. Domestic violence does not discriminate. It can leave you traumatized and devastated, mentally, emotionally, financially. You can find yourself homeless, jobless, helpless. The list can go on. There's blankets of insecurities, triggers, doubts, and other residual effects that become hurdles that impact our life as we do our best to move on. Many people associate butterflies with a sense of freedom. We've been taught along the way to focus on the transformation that takes place inside of the cocoon. I invite you to take a moment to conceptualize all the odds the caterpillar was up against and needed to defeat in order to get to a safe place, to build its cocoon and actually experience the transformation. My name is A. Garcia. I am a mother and survivor of a double attempted homicide. Now, I'm dedicating my life to take yours to the next level by experiencing post-traumatic growth to begin a new chapter in your life. Let's get started on this journey together. Garcia here with Confronting Domestic Violence. For what you want to conquer, you must confront. Today, I have a special guest, Althea Williams, who is willing to share her story, her journey, and what she's doing today. Please keep in mind that we do touch on sensitive topics, and nothing that we talk about here is to ignite any triggers. Instead, we are here to help empower, make you feel like there's nothing wrong with the situation that you were in, might be in, or that you were in. We are a community, and again, here to empower, uplift, and just share our journey so you can find your strength and your wisdom, because that is the definition of post-traumatic growth. And ultimately, when we have children, we need to feed them emotional intelligence so they have the opportunity to live a healthy future. So I want to welcome Althea. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure. And first of all, I want to thank those people, women and men also, who are out there who have been victims of domestic violence and they are thriving in improving and working on themselves, as we should.
Absolutely. Domestic violence does not discriminate. No matter who you are, what you are, where you come from, where your background is, it doesn't matter. Yeah, the statistics are, unfortunately, I hate to say it, unfortunately, the statistics are true. It's 1 out of 3 women and 1 out of 7 men. And men, that's actually growing. So it's unfortunate that we're still dealing with this. 1641 was when it was first presented to law. I don't want to say law enforcement, but to government as something that should not be tolerated. 1641. So over 350 years, we have been fighting for rights and for protection under domestic violence. So without getting into too many statistics or avenues that we could spend hours and hours on, let's get down to where you would like to start your experience and journey, because there's a lot here. We had a little
Yeah,
conversation
sure.
behind the scenes, and there's a lot.
Sure. I like to tell my clients, I'm an integrative wellness and spiritual life coach. And I like to tell my clients, I like to begin with the end in mind. So where I'm at now is only because of how I came out of my trauma and built myself up to get to where I'm at. Right now, I am currently a student finishing all my academic requirements, and I'm in my dissertation proposal phase for my PhD in mind and body medicine. And I chose to do mind and body medicine in the midst of my storm, in the midst of my, as in a spiritual realm, when we use the definition tower moment, in the midst of my tower moment, I chose to start my PhD because I wanted to know why my mind, my body, and my spirit was failing so horribly. And not knowing was really driving me to find an answer. And as I searched and as I put my focus on that, the universe itself delivered this school on the website. I was just looking at information about my divorce and what I can get, what information I can get instead of the lawyer charging me arm and a leg, which he did anyway. This school just came right across my screen, and I pursued it, and I do not regret it 4 years later. So that's where I'm at. I am currently practicing integrative wellness and spiritual life coaching with a certification in biofeedback, Reiki, and equine specialist. And so that's where I'm at now, but where I was really we are here to talk about. And I want to pause a little bit if you have a question.
Wow, I do not have a question. I'm over here in awe. Biofeedback, not a lot of people even know what biofeedback is. And I
Right.
love that you're doing so many holistic approaches, because my personal opinion, maybe not for everybody, but for me personally, going the natural way to cope, overcome, and rise above is definitely a much better avenue than suppressing and taking medication to ignore.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does take strength, and again, it goes back to needing to confront what we want to conquer. And you
Yeah.
absolutely did that. I'm over here, oh my gosh, you're pursuing your PhD. And with that mind body spirit, that's another thing that not too many people can grasp when we're going through our trauma or survival mode and mechanisms. But it is all tied, it's all tied into
Yeah.
one. So when one goes down or one starts tripping up, the rest are following. It's that domino effect. So
Right. Right.
I am just like, wow.
And I have to say this also, when you have the end in mind and the end is right, the end came true, because a lot of my friends were the naysayers. They're like, it's stupid for you to go to do a PhD in the middle of a divorce. You're not going to have the focus. You're not going to. And I said, you know what? That is not the type of support I need. And that's one thing that I want to talk about is when you're asking for support, you empower yourself and define what support you want from your friends and those around you, or even the legal aspect of it. So that I'm going to dive into that. I'm going to write that down because I want to come back to that, because that was what brought me into where I'm at right now, is that defining my boundaries and what type of support I wanted from folks. And you mentioned the mind, body, spirit, and how it all combines together. I have to say that I joined the Navy straight out of high school because I wanted to go to college. And I was a really strong Christian. And you remember the Bible talks about, I don't know if you're Christian or if you are Buddhist, but I'm going to mention something about the Christian Bible. And the Bible talked about the people back in the days were so close to God that they felt like they were climbing a stairway to heaven. And to confuse them and keep them away from heaven, God split everybody up and create different languages and different cultures. So thus is why the split in Africa and Asia and so forth. So this closeness of feeling like you're really touching heaven, I believe I experienced that during my high school years. But when I went into the military, I felt the more longer I stayed in the military, the further away I became from heaven, because there were so many earthly things that were distracting boys. the military sexual trauma, the war, doing things that were morally not something that Christians would do. And so I started feeling like I was distant, going further and further away from my faith. But it was my faith, though, that root of who I was and how I was brought up, helped me overcome a lot of the trauma. And that goes again, some people may not have had that strong rooted parenting that gave them a structure to be resilient. And one of the other things when I have clients, I teach them a resiliency and building a toolbox. If they don't have anything in their toolbox based on the fact that they didn't have that in their experience, I help them build a resilient toolbox. And so resiliency is really important in my journey. And I would love to talk more about that if anybody have any questions about that. So after the Navy, I met my ex in the Navy. I knew he was a narcissist, but I thought I was a strong, intelligent Black woman that I can handle somebody who's a narcissist. I know what was right, what from wrong. I thought I loved the guy, but he loved only the material part of me. Over the years, his actions just started showing. It was just about the money. It was just about the status. That's all he wanted. For me, I thought I was still strong. I was still focusing on my career as a naval officer. And then we have kids. I was focusing on being a mom and being an officer in the military and just letting him grow up. But the more I ignored him, the more violent and passive aggressive he became. And after about 10 years, I said I want a divorce. But what he did was he was enlisted in the military, and 9/11 had just happened. And so for him, he went right back into the active reserves and found all the deployments that he can go on. And when you're on deployment, a sailor cannot be tried in court, in a civil court, for divorce or any matter. So that divorce was put on hold. He comes back, he finds another one, he comes back, and he did that 3 times. Finally, about at the 16-year mark, he comes home and was just, I believe he exhumed the signs of PTSD. So now you have a narcissist with PTSD, and then would not go in and get help because he didn't want that to be on his record. And as a result, me and my 2 boys became the target of the wall that he could hit out of frustration for what he was going through.
Wow. Wow. First of all, thank you for your service and your time. And this is a topic that I have not touched on with other people. I know I have heard, and I do have friends that have served, and I have been made aware that domestic violence does exist quite a bit in
Oh, yes.
the military. And so here you are trying to get a divorce at the 10-year mark because you already reached your threshold. And now he's basically saying, if I can't have you, nobody can have you. So good luck trying to catch me and divorce me. Now you're stuck. Is that kind of
Yeah.
what you felt?
Right. Yeah. And then he comes back and he started using the kids. And as soon as I said, and I go to the courthouse, the kids come crying, Mom, please don't divorce Dad. We want you guys to be together. And of course, played that a few times and I got pulled into it. But I believe what he was doing, and this came out in court as proof that he was hiding his financial money. He was hiding every single one of it in his aunt's name. And that was not proved in court, but I know because he started flaunting it in our face in court by borrowing money from his aunt that I needed to pay back as a part of the 50-50 split in what they call communal property. Because he believed his bills were my bills and my bills were his bills, but in all actuality, he wanted all of his bills to be mine and none of my bills to be his.
Right. And when you go on tour, you get paid extra. So there was more
Nope.
money involved.
I did not see one bit of that. And what was going on was that as an officer, I just did not want my kids to be in lack. So I went ahead and continued paying the bills, paying for the mortgage, and because I had the money, and I was not going, and I struggled having these discussions with him about paying a portion of his money towards the family. And it was always a struggle from year one all the way to year 16 when we filed for separation. And so it was hard, but for me, what was going on is I was one of the first women to be on combatant ships. So here I am on combatant ships, going to sea, going to war, because at 19 before 1993, Congress was not allowing women to be on warships. They could be on hospital ships or they can be on shore, or amphibious ships, which are oilers that only goes out to refuel the ships that are going to combat. And in 1993, Congress authorized it, and the My Year Group 1994 from the Naval Academy were the first group of women to go. And here I am doing that under constant stress from that, being one female of 300 men on ship and having to deal with the lack of support, and then coming home and having to deal lack of support. I was burning the candle on both ends. And after about the 10-year mark, my body started inflaming. So the first signs of you not listening to your body, and I'm going to say it again, the first sign of you not listening to your body is inflammation. And so my body was trying to tell me that something was wrong, and I kept on ignoring it. So as the inflammation got worse, I went from running 5 miles to barely walking, sometimes having to use a wheelchair, having cortisol injections just to get up out of my chair. And so it became very bad that this chronic stress had taken over my body. And then my mind got taken over because of I was now focusing on how to deal with the pain. The one thing that and you mentioned this about the holistic medicines, the military decided to give me every pill under the sun. And so after taking that, I developed irritable bowel syndrome because my body just had enough. I couldn't process food. I would eat a piece of apple as much as I chewed it. If I chewed it big and swallowed it big, it was going to come back out of my waste system big. I hate to be that descriptive, but it was when you put stuff in your stomach, the acid in your stomach is supposed to break it down into glucose and go into your bloodstream. Nothing was going into my bloodstream. And so I had to deal with IBS while I was trying to file for divorce and him avoiding me. So the stress level and the pain level became really bad. Then, of course, come the spiritual side where, oh, I'm not doing things like I used to. I'm not able to escape and get away and do relaxing thing as I used to. My spirit started developing a negative perspective on life and how I was going to I felt trapped. I literally felt trapped. I couldn't get out of my divorce. And he had warned me, if you divorce me, you're going to be in trouble. And I didn't know to what extent he was going to this trouble was going to be.
Right.
And so what happened, long story short, was he was plotting with one of the neighbors. We had moved, he had found a place. What happened, the last part of my military tour, I went to Canada. He had just came back from Afghanistan. I was authorized to bring the children to Canada with me. But because he came back 2 weeks before, he now has a say in the move. So he denied to, the kids going. I had to go by myself. I had to report for duty.
Right.
So left them in a home, a military housing. And what he did was, oh, I don't like it. I don't like the way they're talking to me. We need to leave. Well, what he was doing was he was making it look like I had abandoned them and made them homeless.
Oh
And
my
so threatened to tell my superiors that I had abandoned him and his kids and that he had no home. So I readily went back home, took a couple of days off, and we found a house and purchased it. That was mistake number one. I was now fixed to another communal property that I would have to deal with. And he knew the divorce was coming, but he was more concerned about how much money can he get off me. So buying a house, he will get at least 50-50. Going until the 20 years in the military, he'll get 50% of my retirement. If I were to die, he had a life insurance, $100,000 life insurance on me. If he can prove that I was abusive, he can get child support from 2 kids. And then if he can prove that he has no money, then he can get spousal support. And so he created the scenario by depleting his money, hiding his money, and then actually he and the neighbor started plotting a way to create scenarios where the neighbor witnessed me having a serious conversation with him. He would come into my face and start fights, and I would tell him to back away. And he wouldn't back away because he was trying to start the fight to see if I would touch him first. And a couple of times that happened. I did put my hand up and he came right into my body. And I called the police. And as I tell the police, I put my hand up to block him away from me. They arrested me a couple of times.
Wow.
And what he was doing was trying to build a record of times I would call the police. Because I was Black and he was white, I had no defense on my side. They believed him. One time, the third time we called, he had placed ice on his face and his face looks cheeky. And I didn't know what he was doing, but he told the police that I had punched him. When they asked one child, the oldest child, that child sided with him, but my other child said, no, that didn't happen. And so the police actually left it alone. Then he got the gist of it. If the children were to confirm his allegations, then I can get in trouble. So this, weeks goes on, and he would just continue to start fights. He would come home and start fights. Now, I had lived with one of my sisters. She lived downstairs. We had taken care of her. She had lost her home, and she had come to take care of my kids while I was gone for the 2 years in Canada. She did not once interfere. She just stayed in her room. Long story short, she was also supporting him because he was paying her on the other side. I told her when I came back, I can't support you anymore. You need to get a job. She didn't like that. So when I asked her to pay $500 for a 2,000 square foot space that she was in, she grumbled and said I couldn't. I could only pay $300. So what she was doing is giving me $300, but then he would go buy $300 worth of food that she wants, and they would cook it upstairs and laugh at how I can't cook and how the kids just enjoy Auntie's food. Oh, Auntie, you should do this. And so he would just use the kids to laugh at me when I cook or to demean me. And so he was manipulating the children a lot. It took 6 years to get my divorce. And he built this case of this mad Black woman that did not exist, but he created scenarios to make sure that he had a very strong defense. It got to the point where the children got one of the children's were put in the middle of it, and he attempted to try to have me prosecuted for domestic violence. I went to a trial, and now this is what they did. They took me out of my county, one, put me in another county that was all white. I don't think there was even 1% Black person in that county. Then, and when I chose that woman, the prosecutor eliminated her from the case. So it was all against me, where I could have gotten put into jail for 18 years, which is exactly what he wants. Either I am away in Canada doing my duties, or I'm in jail. Any scenario, as long as he had control of my money and the kids and the house that he didn't pay for. So I got to the point where my lawyer, I call him incompetent. And I started telling my lawyer what to do. And I started advocating for myself, because I said, you're not listening to me. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to put me on the stand. I wanted him to put me on the stand, and I said, these questions I want you to ask. And they were all open. As a life coach, when you're talking to your clients, you ask open-ended questions.
That's right.
So that the story is not designed by you, but designed by the person telling it. And
Right.
so that's what they did. He tried to take my service dog away from me during the trial. My dog sat right between me and that lawyer, the defense attorney. But what was so incredible, this is where my spiritual awakening started waking up. I was sitting there and the defense attorney, I call him a wanker because he kept on whining about everything. And every time he would whine, the judge would say, dismiss the jury, and the jury would go back into the room.
When that door closed, you had a painting in your head and pick it up.
The door is a vision of three angels. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Did you hear three angels?
Yes.
I think they don't want me to describe it the way I was describing it, so I'll just be bland. I saw three angels on the door. One had his ears to the door. One was on the ground kneeling like this, and the other one was, I think it was, I don't know what it was doing, but it was doing something of this sort of like this. So basically, I was told by God already that don't worry, this might look impossible. I'm going to bring you through this. And it was impossible. Everything was against me. Different court type, and everything was against me. He had everything. He had witnesses. I brought in my classmate. I brought in the several mayors who I was an active participant of my town. I brought in character witnesses to show people I was always with my kids in public. So they testified on my character. But what cinched it was the fact that I learned how to speak in public. And they said, when you get on the court, you look at the jury and your hands and everything is speaking to the crowd. And I did that. And I think that's what made it. And I was not guilty on both counts. And the jury came up and said, couple of things came up and said, we're sorry for what you're going through. We can see right through what he's doing. He was using your children to get you in trouble. And so that was good. But now I have to go through a civil case now. Even then I said I was going to forgive him. I wasn't going to go through the divorce.
Why?
2 days later. Why? Because I was stupid.
No, there's
Because I was stupid.
no, it's not stupid.
Yeah.
Maybe because of other reasons, you had emotional feelings, you still believe that he was a good
Yeah.
man, maybe something like that, but that does not qualify you as stupid. As a life coach,
I was still struggling with it. I was still struggling with the Christian part about for better or for worse. I was struggling with that.
there
But
we
then
go.
I remembered the very first, right before our wedding, this pastor looked at me and said, if you're not sure, don't go through it. And I remembered that. But then all of a sudden on the radio, I heard, any man that pulls you away from God, you are no longer tied to the obligation of marriage. And I definitely was being pulled further and further away from my faith. And so I had to think about that, but that still did not make me decide to divorce. What made me decide to divorce was how he used my oldest child to physically abuse me. And I'm not going to go into too much details about that, but at that point, I was already seeing for 10 years in the 16-year marriage, I was seeing a psychiatrist working through all my portion of the issues. You know what? This is what he says. And the psychiatrists are like, no. So I developed emotional intelligence as I went through this. And what I finally had to do was I had to set some boundaries, some very hard boundaries with my kids. And I said, if you do this to me again, I'm going to do this. I'm going to report it. But he had friends in the police force and they were not turning in the reports. They were not doing anything. So I had to finally file for divorce and file for a separation order, to which it was not wrong, but it was at the wrong time. I filed for the separation order, but I was on my way to go to Jamaica to see my 99-year-old uncle. My sister was still in the house. He came into right before he left. The fridge broke down, so we had to use the freezer, and I had to leave, and he had to vacate the house for 2 weeks. So I come back, and we have to go back to court to validate his 2 weeks of stay, he reported to the jury that I abandoned my kids and then left them with no food. I
I
asked my
want to.
sister.
I'm sorry.
I
I
asked
want.
my
I want
sister.
to. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I want to take a pause right here because you have just explained 10 to 16 years worth of mental, emotional, financial, economical, and child abuse. Okay. And I think that with this journey that you've shared thus far, I think it would be really advantageous to share with our listeners what type of signs to look for
Yeah,
that you experienced that you learned from that, so that the next person maybe won't have to go through a decade and some change of dealing with
yeah,
this.
yeah. And the biggest thing you have to want to see is this an awareness of how many times do you feel drained,
Mm-hmm.
literally just drained after being around that person. And the drain comes from you are giving so much of yourself, but that person is just slamming it back in your face, belittling you in public, laughing at you in public, making fun of you in public, demeaning you in front of even your friends and family. And but in private does not show you any affection. And maybe, but in public will buy you flowers in public, but if you're by yourself, he wouldn't buy you flowers just on a whim. So stuff like that. And then the physical abuse. Now, emotional abuse takes longer. And if you're finding yourself being feeling depressed because you don't feel good because of how this person describes you to yourself or to other people, yeah, that happens. Any other signs that I can think of? Financial. They don't provide you, and it's fine. They find as minimum as they can financial support, or they hold all of the money and don't give you any portion of it. And so that is a big red flag.
Yeah. Especially if they're asking you to be the one to fork it all out or to pick up all the bills,
Yes.
not put, or I don't want to say not put things in their name, but keep like, yeah, keep everything in your name so they have the freedom to go and not have those financial obligations and you're stuck with everything. And it also sounds like he used the court system. He also
He
found a
did.
way to manipulate the
Yeah.
system.
It was very hard. Long story short, my body started just inflaming, swelling up. My migraines got so bad that I felt like I was going to have a brain aneurysm. I was separated from my kids several times, and the divorce just kept on getting worse and worse. And what the lawyers loved was the fact that I had declared my finances. So between the lawyers and him, I was getting bleed dry. I
Yep.
literally bleed dry. They would cancel the trial every 3 months. They would prepare for the trial a week before something comes up, and it would get canceled. They did that 7 times. After 7 times, I had less than $10,000 in my account. So I told my lawyer I couldn't pay him anymore. 3 months before the seventh trial, he quit.
Wow.
And I had to decide whether I pay another lawyer $6,000 just to catch up and then whatever else to represent me. And I decided, no, I was going to represent myself. The trial took 8 days. I had 2 months to prepare. I just studied every paperwork that was given. And I just had a couple of classmates from the Naval Academy who were lawyers. And I just conference with them how certain words I didn't understand, but I did all the research and I did all the preparation. And one of the things that was so prominent was my sister that where I lived in North Carolina. She is a shaman. She is a master shaman. And so she was doing things, telling me, talking to the spirits, and the spirits telling me, relax, don't do this, don't do that. And one of the things they told me during my trial is you need to just continue to breathe and relax. We're going to show you a sign that everything is going to be all right. 5 minutes before the first day started, I had this rod that is so thick, like it's like this thick, times two, where my clothes in the hanger was hanging. So it's a big fat rod. It broke in half. And then a couple of other things broke right before. I was like, okay, there's my sign. And one of the other signs was, I asked in my meditation, I asked for a hummingbird to remind me to breathe. And throughout the entire process, I was in so much pain. I started painting. And as I'm painting, those stories started coming out. And so I pulled all my pain and put it onto the canvas. And you guys will be able to see those paintings on my Facebook page, where it's called Intuitive Art
Intuitive art. That's
by
beautiful.
Althea. And those paintings are the stories of my trial. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm going to stop talking.
Wow. Oof. That's heavy. That's a lot. I cannot imagine 16 years of that type of abuse every single time you turn a corner. No matter what it is, it was from a different angle. And it sounds like it was premeditated. Obviously, he did things that was very intentional just to hurt you and the children. And while you were going through all of this, and it sounds like you're even your own kin, your sister who's living with you now, the people that you love, that you're giving, that you had built this support system with and around, are now almost
Yeah.
almost like your enemy. Your own children and your
Yeah.
own sister are now
Yeah.
siding with your ex-husband to manipulate and make you feel worthless. I don't How do you get through that? What did you do? Were you able to see it right away? Were you trying to research to find out if this was, were you looking at yourself, wondering if it was something really with you? Did he have you convinced at some point? I mean,
Mm.
what was that journey?
I was done. I was just done. The first night that the long story short, when I came back from Jamaica and we had to defend the restraining order, he bought in the fact that I abandoned the kids and blah, blah, blah. And the court believed him and kicked me out of my house. So here I am. I had to leave my house, and I'm not supposed to discuss with the kids anything about the case. So I told the kids I have to leave because the courts want me to leave.
But they're
So
teenagers.
he get to move back in. And so he moves back into the house that he never paid a dime for. And I was homeless, period. They didn't care where I went. My sister didn't care where I went. She didn't even once call to me and say, do you need any clothes? I wasn't allowed to take anything. And so I was able to just take a suitcase of clothes. That's it.
Okay. If there is somebody out there in a situation like this, and in family court, there is a lot of, I will say, gray areas, because when you're in a domestic violence situation, the judge will tell you stay the furthest away. But when there's children involved, they tell you to figure it out. Here you are, your kids are teenagers, you're homeless when everything you built, or everything that was built, basically was from you.
Yeah.
What would you, or how could you, what would you do differently to be able to navigate through that for a different outcome? And
There's
what would you,
nothing.
there's nothing.
Nothing. It didn't matter how intelligent or how prominent I was. It didn't matter how my character was. We gave the judge over 20 pages of character letters from the city, newspaper articles about me and the kids. She said, I don't need to read any of that stuff. I don't need to believe that what's fake, what's out in public. You are the problem, and you are the dysfunctional part of this family. So she started, this was right when Trump came into office. I have to tell you this. And so the courts at the time, they were doing whatever they want because they thought they had the power to do whatever they want, and literally that's what the courts were doing. They were doing whatever they want and they can get away with it. So racism was really, it was very big. And that was a part of the decision in it. She didn't care how my character was. She didn't care how honorable I was. How much I worked and created this positive person that I was, showing up authentically. It did not matter. So what the moral of the story is, God said, don't lose faith. And as I continued to show up, my authentic self is what proved the truth. because I paid for a guardian ad litem, and she was being bribed by him. And she kept on delaying. She delayed 2 of the 7 times the trial got postponed. And my lawyer had to get in. I had to get on my lawyer, which he charged me more money for, to get on to her and say, do we need to have you changed, before she finally, after a year, submit the report that should have only taken 6 months.
Oh my gosh.
So what happened was, she could not find any evidence of any allegation of what my ex was saying. So basically, my children had to be returned to me. But because my oldest was 17, he can choose with whom he wanted to go with. And that's the law. And so he chose to go with his father. But the youngest one, the minor, had to come back to me, with me having full custody of him, because they saw the abuse was being done by him and his brother. Because now his father was encouraging the brother to do the damage, and he would testify, oh, they were having a fight. So he created a mental health situation on my youngest. And I had to work really hard getting him well again. And sometimes when he has anxiety and he's stressed out, he still falters. But we made a promise to each other. We said, no matter what, I'm here. I will show up no matter how ugly it looks. You call me. And so he has followed through with that promise. And when he's having bad days, I walk him through it. I teach him the breath. I teach him to tap in, and all the stuff that I know and have learned to do for myself. I teach him and then get his body regulated into the space where he can have emotional intelligence to finally go ahead and be okay. So for me, how did I get through this? I will say, when I was first kicked out of my house and homeless, I did not want to continue life. I didn't. So I called the suicide hotline, and Spirit hung up the phone. And this is why. Spirit hung up the phone. He brought that to court, saying that I was an unfit mother because I was suicidal. But because it was through the VA, they couldn't get the record from the VA. Because I called my therapist, we talked about it, we worked through that emotion. We worked on a immediate plan as to where I can find a place to stay. We worked with the domestic violence department in the county, and they gave me an advocate who showed up with me during my court and helped me print paperwork, because I had to now defend myself. I had to have 4 folders that were stacked with hundreds of pages times 4 printed, and they printed all of my documents for free. You know how much money it costs a dime a sheet? Yep. So I had over 400 pages times 4 folders that I had to create. One for his lawyer, one for the judge, one for the judge's secretary, and one for myself. Not only did they do that, but a member from a church just showed up, and they knew who I was, and they said, well, how can we help you? I said, you can help me by loaning me your copier. And that also, after hours, I would go and do the copying, because I had to do that. I had to do that 4 folders times 4 twice.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Because his lawyer, thinking I didn't know the law, was creating havoc, and he wanted pre-documents before the trial, which I think that was illegal, but I gave it to him. So he knew what was coming at them when I was presenting my case. But God kept on showing up. I'm telling you, people kept on showing up in my life that have known me for years. 5 of my naval officers there. One is an admiral, one is a captain, high-ranking officers from my classmate. They cornered me in a Zoom call. They cornered me right before my trial, like 15 minutes before my trial. And they prayed with me, and they reminded me who I was. The Althea that they saw at my worst, at my best, and at my sometimes, because I spent 4 years at the Naval Academy. That's the Althea they reminded me of. And that's who I showed up as, that person, because over 15 years, I had been mentally beaten down into something that I kept on questioning. So the moral of my story is, I was broken, and I just didn't want to do it. And I went to the beach, screaming at God, screaming. Nobody was at the beach. It was midnight. And I swear to God, I heard this like a wing something landed next to me. I look over, there was nothing. And I was going to end it that night. And I knew an angel was sitting next to me, and I started crying. And it just stayed next to me until I was done crying, and then walked back with me to a friend's place where I was staying. And he had a girlfriend, so he's like, you can stay in my bed and I can go stay with my girlfriend. So I had a place to stay for 3 days. And I was alone. And I was like, oh, I can kill myself and nobody would care. Nobody would know. But that would be horrible to the friend.
And your kid.
A vision from God as to what to stage about domestic violence and how I made it through and how my story can help somebody else. For 5 seconds, I saw that vision. And now it hasn't happened yet. I'm not on stage speaking, but I do know that I've been prepared, and I've been working on myself, and I'm showing up, and I'm ever so resilient and ever so more in love with myself now than I've ever been in my life. And that was one of the biggest things that came out of it. Because I worked on myself, I now know how to care for myself and love myself. I could barely say that before. And it's hard. It's hard when you've been abused to say you love yourself.
That's right. Yeah. I am there with you. I have been there with you. I understand that wholeheartedly. And again, for our listeners, if you are feeling like you are not you, if you are feeling drained, like Alita shared, if you are feeling manipulated, if you're seeing that in the beginning you're so beautiful and you're so great and all these wonderful things, and then it flips on you, and all of a sudden you're finding yourself defending yourself or proving yourself or giving all of yourself to the point where you are depleted and you're questioning who you are or questioning how people are seeing you, where you're asking people for support and they're not even there to support you, or you're asking for character references, and even with all of that, and find yourself in court. I mean, we are talking about broken down from head to toe.
Yeah.
And when you go through such a devastating turn of events in your life, the strength that it takes to look at yourself in the mirror and to recognize what your needs are, despite of what anybody else may see, think, feel, hear, have an opinion about. Nothing is bigger. Nothing should
Yeah.
ever be bigger than
And
your life.
and this is where I'm going to give you guys the woohoo part. Because I was done physically in 3 dimensional, mortally just done, dead, devastated. Nothing about me mattered. My spirit took over. So the soul that was inside of me said, oh, hell no. I'm going to make sure that you come back. And so my soul started coming up. And this African shaman guy keeps showing up all the time. He's like, oh, hell no. And he would start speaking. I would start speaking in tongues. And that's when my gifts started showing up. I would sit there and I would burn. I loved the fireplace. And I would be burning the things that I want to release and learning to let go and release things. And all of a sudden the fire would do this. And I would take a picture. And one time I took the picture because I was like, what is going on with my little son? I know they're going to abuse him. And the picture that I painted is on the website. It came out, and I showed the picture of the fire and what I painted. And a year later, the spirit was like, no, that's not the full picture. You have not look at the fire again. And I painted the picture. So there are 2 series of it. What, long story short, Jesus had his hand on him. Mother Mary had his hand on the other hand. And then Mother Mary was blowing the fire over his head, and Jesus was blowing the fire over his head. I like Daniel and his brothers. Even though my son was in the middle of the fire, was in the middle of the trauma, they were making sure that the fire was going over his head and it wasn't harming. And in Mary's hand, and this is all subconscious painting. I did not purposely say I'm going to paint fire. Didn't purposely say I'm going to paint the mask. It was as I was dabbing different colors on the canvas. That's what showed up, and I started painting it according to the fire. And as I painted what I saw in the fire, other things started showing up. So I became an intuitive artist, and I learned to hear what my spirits were saying. And it's the spirits who started talking to me and encouraging me to show up authentically and to know that I have a soul family out there. And boy, they flew in like a bad landing geese, but I met all my soul family. And though that's another story to tell. People don't, what's soul family and what is this and that? But soul family is that person that you know from start. There's a signature, energy signature, that person you've met before in a previous life. And those are the families that I've met. And they're the ones that send energy and healing to me and gave me the support I needed. And a couple of other of my classmates from the Naval Academy that never failed. I call one of them is I call the praying friend. She just prayed for me before every call, before every court cases. And she's to this day, she still prays for me. And it's just beautiful to see because she too was abused by a narcissist and had the same situation, but not as bad as mine. I learned through my therapist, you got to tell people how you want them to support you. And that also became a part of my recovery, is letting people know I might not be strong right now. I just want you to walk with me, or I just want to go on a boat ride. I don't want you to ask me anything.
And thank you for bringing that home, because that community, wherever they come from, that community, wherever they come from, God sent classmates, they pop up when it's needed. The community that is there to support you is so important. And I also believe in advocates, the advocates that support real victims, that understand the legislative programs, that understand what is available to real-time victims at that moment. Listen, when you're in that space, you don't know where to look, you don't know what's happening. An advocate will take you as far as they can, because that's their passion, and most of them have been there, done that, and that's where that passion comes from. And to me, again, I'm big on the post-traumatic growth, right? You're doing what you're doing because of what you went through, and now you have strength and you have wisdom from that trauma, and here you are serving people today to deal with their traumas and to deal with it in a holistic approach. And same thing here, Confronting Domestic Violence is founded on my personal experience as well. For those of us that have gone through it, and don't forget the statistics, 1 out of 3, 1 out of 7, there's a large community out there. But if we don't speak up, if we don't tell people the help that we need based on the situation that we're in, and you don't need to spill all your business, just talk about what you need help with, and you will be so surprised the flock that comes in to help and support. And here you are sharing that. This is proof in the pudding. You were not calling on many people. You're saying that they just popped up, and then it was established, and still to this day you still have support. And that's so beautiful. And look at where you are today. This is amazing. So
I want to say one thing, that when you're going through something like this, you start focusing on yourself inward. And it makes you unsocial. You make you feel ashamed, make you feel like you want to just go in a corner and hide. That is completely opposite of what you want to do. And this is a part of my study where science is showing this, that we've always been social beings. And our vagus nerves come from behind our ears. It goes through our heart and our lungs, goes down to our pelvic bone. The vagus nerve itself stimulates by vibration and frequency from talking and just being around other people in each other's electromagnetic field. It vibrates a certain vibration or frequency, and it helps us being well. So when we isolate ourselves from others, we're actually isolating ourselves from something that should help us heal. And so when we are in that low vibration of sadness, anger, depression, anxiety, fear, we can't get out of it by ourselves sometimes. We need to be around other people to help lift our vibration. And as your vibration starts to increase, then we start getting out of the depression, the anxiety, and the fear. And we start working through it because our emotional intelligence is also able to come through, because our brain waves are slowing down enough to have the brain just shift his plates in glacier.
Yeah.
Without your control, it will start slowing down. And it takes work, guys. It just takes work. And meditation is one of the best tools I can recommend to try. It's just meditate 5-15 minutes and then do 30 minutes. And as you do that, your brain starts to slow down. And then your brain starts finding the solutions because you're not hyper vigilant. You're not being reactive. And the more you meditate and the more you start becoming aware of when your body itself starts to react, the more you will start getting control. And I want to say this one final thing. I keep saying one final thing, but the body keeps score. And so if we don't allow the energy, the anger, and the fear to dissipate through our body, if we don't allow ourselves to hold space for that emotion, the body will hold it in the muscles, in the organs, and we won't get rid of it. And so therefore, with post-traumatic growth, what we encourage people is to hold space for yourself. When the emotion shows up, okay, I'm gonna feel depressed for 30 minutes, or I'm gonna feel depressed for half a day. And in that half a day, though, I'm gonna do some self-care while I'm feeling that. But I'm gonna hold space for that emotion, and I'm gonna allow it to bring the message it needs to bring me, but then it's gotta go.
Right.
If
That's
it
right.
doesn't go, if it doesn't go within the 30 days or that half a day, for me, I paint. I go outside barefoot. I do gardening. I go hiking. I call a friend. If it's still there, okay, I'm gonna go call a counselor or a life coach. If it's still there, okay, I'm going to go dancing or partying and go to a comedy, but it's going to come out of me. I'm going to evacuate that mother of pearl as much as I can.
Yeah.
Being proactive with yourself is going to be the biggest picture, being resilient, and we all can do it. We can. And we have the support here. We have it right here in the community. And so if you need help, ask for help and show up your authentic self.
Thank you so much for saying that. I usually ask my guests to give a wounds to wisdom statement, but you did it without me asking. So I will skip that question because you just laid it down. And I appreciate that so much. I really do. And sharing your story, and this was a long journey. I keep
Yeah.
saying 16 years. My goodness. And every single thing stripped away from you. And look at where you are today. This is proof in the pudding. I'll say it again. So please, I think that we can have another. I would love to have you back on here because I think that we can talk about triggers, how to identify
Yeah.
them, how to respond opposed to react. Instead of it
Yeah.
being an interview, it could be more of like a discussion because I have a lot of
Yeah.
things that I would like to share as well. And it would be great just to have open discussion about that, to expand on that, because moving out and getting through all of the trauma is one thing, but moving on and leveling up your coping skills and understanding who you are, being solid and confident in who you are, and then being in tune with your body and who you are
Yeah.
is so extremely important. And I really think we should have another episode about that because our experience, your scientific background, this is profound. So please tell our listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, so I want to say about that, if you guys want to just watch some videos about some of the things that I give free advice all the time, YouTube, but go to innerstarcompasshealing.com. I also link it there. That's my website, innerstarcompasshealing.com. And I will provide that in the information. Facebook, you will find me at Inner Star Compass. And also Intuitive Art by Althea. And so Instagram, Inner Star Compass.
Wow.
My personal page is for my friends, so you probably won't get through there.
That's right. That's right. And yes, we will have all of your information in the credits. We'll have all the links and everything for you guys to link up with her, find her. And she's a life coach. She's offering
Yes.
not just free advice, but also coaching. I have a strong belief that when we go to seek help, I find it easier to speak to and receive from somebody who's been there, done that, and
Yeah.
understands. So
What the universe has delivered 3 clients who are going through divorce. with the same scenario, and I can look at them and say, you know what? I can hold space for every single emotion that you have with you. Not hold your emotion, I can hold space with you. That's a big difference, because when I coach, I don't take stuff from you. I give you the power, because you have the power inside of you to heal. And so, guys, thank you so much for everything and for listening to me just talk for so long. But it is a very delicate subject, and it does take time as the story comes out. And it's not about the details, it's about how we got out of the trauma and what's after that. And what's after that is what's on the other side of the river of change once you take the leap and saying, I want to change. I no longer want to be this person. I no longer want to be in this situation. I want to take that leap. And so that's what I do as a life coach. I help people take that leap. And I have a 3-month leap program that is on my website, that if you want to talk about that, I'm more than happy to be there to hold space with you and co-create with you.
How beautiful. Thank you so
Thank
much, Althea. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Confronting Domestic Violence is a 501c3. All contributions, volunteers, and sponsorships are welcomed. It takes a community to make a difference. Nobody should suffer alone. Please scan the QR code.